starting to tell people what the best way that I think to restore something. I'll give them hints and help and stuff like that. So that's a real cool aspect.
The way the guys are at the shop, they basically made that thing, and it looks just like the back one. You could never tell the difference.
One more viral headline was all it took to convince millions of fans that another American Restoration star was gone. For years, shocking headlines, fake social media posts, and viral rumors have blurred the line between fact and fiction. But some of those heartbreaking reports hid an entirely different truth. Which shocking losses on this list are real? Which famous names were declared dead by mistake? And whose story is far more tragic than the rumors ever revealed? The answers aren't what most fans expect. Join us as we uncover the truth behind 10 of America's most beloved restoration stars. Dale Wachsler. Dale Wachsler built his first motorcycle from scratch at 16 years old, decades before American Restoration ever considered him for television. At just 16 years old, he built his first bike from scratch, and by 22, he had opened a Harley-Davidson dealership, making him one of the youngest dealers in the country. He eventually moved his growing motorcycle collection to Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and turned it into Wheels Through Time, a museum built on a simple idea. Every machine inside it still had to run. When American Restoration relaunched in 2016 with 5 different shops instead of one, Dale's museum was one of them, and his infectious, motor-mouthed passion made him an instant favorite. He'd fire up a 90-year-old Indian motorcycle himself and grin like a teenager doing it. Curator was never the right word for him. Viewers who had never cared about vintage bikes before suddenly found themselves hooked on watching him talk. What most of those viewers didn't know was that Dale had been fighting cancer privately since around 2017. He kept working, kept filming, kept the museum running through it all. In 2019, in recognition of his decades of work, he was inducted into the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame, a peak most people in his field only dream of reaching. Less than 2 years after that induction, on February 3, 2021, Dale was 68 when he passed away at his home in Maggie Valley, his wife by his side. He never made the illness part of the show. He simply kept firing up 90-year-old engines until his own body wouldn't let him anymore. His museum still runs today, exactly the way he insisted it always should. The highest honor of his career and the end of his life, separated by barely 24 months. Dale's story is the kind fans grieve honestly, in public, because they got to watch it coming. The next name on this list, fans grieved too, except he was never actually gone. Rick Dale. Rick Dale's story started with a broken bicycle. As a kid, his father handed him a dumpster-rescued bike and told him to fix it, and something clicked. That instinct eventually became Rick's Restorations, a Las Vegas shop that turned rusted-out soda machines and gas pumps into gleaming pieces of Americana. And it became the entire foundation of American Restoration when the show launched in 2010. For 6 seasons, Rick was the show. His son Tyler, his brother Ron, and his stepson Brettley all worked under one roof, and viewers fell in love with the chaos of it. Then, in 2016, without any real explanation from History Channel, Rick's shop disappeared from the lineup entirely, replaced by 5 other restoration businesses around the country. Fans were left completely in the dark, and the silence eventually curdled into something darker online. Search queries asking flatly whether Rick Dale was even still alive. He was, and still is. In October 2015, Mayor Carolyn Goodman stood outside his shop and declared it Rick's Restorations Day in the city of Las Vegas. In that same era, Rick tracked down parts from collectors overseas to finish a restoration he delivered personally to Billy Joel's own shop. The overhead just never recovered once the cameras and the tourist traffic left, and the shop eventually closed for good. Rick didn't disappear, though. He pivoted hard, launching a laser cutting and embroidery business called My Best Font Forward, alongside his wife Kelly, who has since built her own career as a real estate agent. He's also written books about vintage restoration, keeping one foot in the world that made him famous. But if Rick wasn't hiding anything, why has his own former employee never said a single word since the cameras stopped? On purpose or not? Kevin "Cowboy" Lowery. Everybody remembers Cowboy. He handled the metal polishing and woodworking at Rick's restorations, and Rick himself once said the man could find something to complain about even in a bonus check. Viewers loved him precisely because he wasn't performing. He looked intimidating, acted intimidating, and clearly couldn't have cared less about being on television. Cowboy never revealed his real first name on camera, and he ran the entire show without a single social media account. When American Restoration rebooted in 2016, without him or the rest of the original crew, he vanished from public view entirely. And for a man already known for his short temper, that total silence didn't read as peaceful retirement to a lot of viewers. It read as a red flag. That instinct was wrong. When Tyler couldn't get sand-blasted metal to come out right because it kept bending under the sand, Cowboy was the one who told him to switch to walnut powder instead. He was also the one who taught the crew to stay quiet on someone else's property while pulling artifacts out for restoration. He trained half the shop, walnut powder, staying quiet on other people's property, all of it, grumbling the entire time. He never gave an interview, never confirmed or denied a single rumor. As far as anyone can tell, he simply stopped talking to the public the day the cameras left. Some longtime viewers guess he's out on a farm somewhere, still doing metalwork nobody will ever film. A strange kind of ending for someone who spent a decade on reality television. The next name on this list didn't get a choice, and this one isn't a rumor. Richard "Old Man" Harrison. Richard Harrison appeared in a crossover cameo during American Restoration's very first season in 2010, playing the same gruff, deadpan patriarch fans already knew from Pawn Stars. Fans knew him best from Pawn Stars, where he'd opened the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas with his son Rick back in 1989, building it into one of the most recognizable businesses on cable television. A single stare from Richard could shut down a bad deal before anyone finished the pitch. He retired from the show in 2017, and by then his appearances had already grown rare. Fans assumed it was simply old age catching up with a man in his 70s. What almost nobody outside his inner circle knew was that Richard had been fighting Parkinson's disease, a battle he'd kept almost entirely private. On June 25, 2018, Richard passed away at age 77, surrounded by family. His son Rick broke the news on Instagram, calling him his hero and saying he'd lost his long battle with Parkinson's that morning. His grandson Corey wrote that Richard had been more than a grandfather to him. He'd been a true best friend and mentor for 15 years. The tributes flooded in from across the reality TV world, a reminder of just how far his influence had reached beyond one pawn shop in Las Vegas. That's 2 real losses told so far, and this list actually has 4. Everything left from here is mostly names the internet filled in with guesses, starting with a shop that just stopped updating one day and never explained why. Andy Bowman Jr. When American Restoration relaunched with 5 new shops in 2016, Andy Bowman Jr. brought something different to the lineup. His shop, Monkey Business Customs, in Grosse Ile, Michigan, specialized in the kind of oddball builds nobody else on the show touched. A shuffle bowling machine one week, a 50s carnival tank turned into a working go-kart for a local motorcycle group the next. History Channel liked him enough to cut a standalone web exclusive around him, built entirely around how much of himself he put into every project that rolled through the door. Season 7 turned out to be his only season. When History Channel declined to renew the show after just 13 episodes, Andy didn't just fade from television. Every trace of him online simply stopped updating. Monkey Business Customs stopped updating anything, the website, the socials, all of it, the same day the cameras left. For a business that had just gotten a national spotlight, that kind of silence is unusual enough that fans still ask about it in comment sections years later. Andy most likely just never wanted a public-facing brand in the first place. Plenty of small shop owners don't. Unlike Cowboy, there isn't even confirmation that he actively avoided attention, just an absence of information the internet filled in on its own. Up next is a cast member who never left the shop at all, and the internet still tries to bury him anyway. Bobby Stroud. Bobby Stroud built his first car with a few friends as a teenager in Glendale, California, with zero idea it would ever put Johnny Depp's or Tim Allen's keys in his hand one day. By 2009, he'd won the Ford Design Award for a custom 1960 Ford Starliner he called the Scarliner, and that single build put his name in front of exactly the kind of clientele most builders only dream about: Johnny Depp, Tim Allen, and a growing list of Hollywood names who wanted him touching their cars. When American Restoration rebuilt itself in 2016, Bodie's Los Angeles shop, Bobby Stroud Industries, was the anchor of the new format, featured across all 13 episodes. Viewers watched him restore a Depression-era electric car charger for a museum and rebuild a 1941 Plymouth for a fast food CEO. He treated every wreck that rolled in like it deserved a second act. That same client list kept growing after the show ended. Bobby Stroud Industries never stopped, still building for private clients years later, still turning up on other build shows when the right project calls for it, long after History Channel moved on to other shows. Bobby's the loudest proof yet that most of this cast is exactly where they left off. No mystery, still working. The next name on this list wasn't so lucky, and almost nobody's ever heard the real story. Bob Halliday. Hurricane Katrina took Bob Halliday's home, his shop, and nearly everything else, years before History Channel ever came calling. He and his wife Laurel had run a thriving restoration business in New Orleans until the storm destroyed both their house and their livelihood in the same week. They fled to Marietta, Georgia, Bob's hometown, with almost nothing, and had to buy clothes at Walmart just to get through the first few days. From that wreckage, Bob rebuilt Bob's garage from scratch, restoring vintage gas pumps and Coca-Cola machines one piece at a time. Roughly a decade later, that same rebuilt shop caught the attention of the History Channel, and Bob joined the 2016 lineup as one of the 5 new faces of American Restoration. He brought the same steady, unbothered attitude to the screen that had gotten him through losing everything once already. Fans responded to him immediately, drawn to a business built entirely around saving things other people had already written off. His only season on television turned out to be his last full year of anything. On July 25, 2017, roughly a year after Bob's Garage aired, Bob died in his sleep at 66, the day after hip surgery. He went in for a routine hip surgery and simply didn't wake up the next morning, nothing anyone could have seen coming. No warning signs to point back to later. His shop closed not long after. This is the one name on the list where the internet's instinct ran exactly backwards. Silence read as safety instead of the warning it actually was. Bob's silence looked ordinary, so nobody thought to build a rumor around it. So what does it look like when a genuinely ordinary silence gets mistaken for something dark instead, starting with the star's own son? Tyler Dale. In a driveway in Las Vegas, a 1965 Ford F-100 sits half-finished, the same truck Tyler Dale picked up in high school and has been chipping away at ever since, whenever the rest of his work allows it. He's been working in the restoration trade professionally since he was 17, years before American Restoration ever gave him a title. He was around his father's shop from the age of 2, and by the time cameras started rolling, he was already Rick's default second-in-command, even when his father openly worried on camera that Tyler wasn't taking the responsibility seriously enough. Over the show's run, viewers watched him grow from a teenager with half his hair dyed blonde into the shop's official foreman, a promotion the crew met with decidedly mixed feelings. When the show's final season wrapped without his father's shop in it, most of the internet assumed Tyler's trail had gone cold along with it. It hadn't. He kept working in welding, woodworking, and metal fabrication. And years later, he sat down with a restoration film crew to talk through what he'd built since, the old F-100 included. Even the star's own son ended up on a death rumor list for the crime of just not chasing cameras anymore. His paper trail is the cleanest of anybody's on this list, which almost makes him the least interesting rumor here. Steve Hale. A first-place trophy for a restored 1960 Jaguar, won at a local car show when he was just 18, was the first sign Steve Hale had a future in this business. Born in 1986, he opened his own shop only 2 years later. He built his reputation the hard way. By the time he was 30, he displayed at the Syracuse Nationals, joined the Specialty Equipment Market Association, and won a Truckin' Magazine award, a resume most builders take twice as long to build. By the time American Restoration went looking for new shops in 2016, Steve's Restorations and Hot Rods, based in upstate New York, had built exactly the kind of track record the network wanted. Steve became one of the 5 faces of that final season, bringing a quieter, more technically focused presence to the show compared to some of his flashier co-stars. When the season ended and the show wasn't renewed, most people stopped paying attention. Steve didn't stop working. In 2022, his shop announced it was restoring the front entrance of the Stanley Theater, working alongside Utica Glass Company to bring the historic facade back. Same guy, same shop, still doing the exact work that got him on television in the first place, just without anyone filming it this time. For a man who built his entire career before television ever noticed him, going back to doing the work quietly probably never felt like a loss at all. Steve's story ends the way most of these do. An ordinary life a camera just stopped following. So what actually happened to the one name on this list nobody's forgotten? Frank Fritz. Frank Fritz was never officially part of the Rick's Restorations crew, but when he showed up on American Restoration in 2011, fans already knew his face from a different barn entirely. He was one half of American Pickers, the guy with the easy laugh and the eye for anything with a story stapled to it. On screen, he called himself the common man's picker, joking that his ideal customer bought a 30-pack of beer on Friday, not an $8,000 sign. Off-screen, something much heavier was building. By 2020, Frank had quietly stepped away from Pickers for back surgery, and the empty seat in the van went unexplained for over a year. When he finally spoke out in the summer of 2021, he revealed he hadn't spoken to his co-star in 2 years, that nobody had checked on him after his surgery, and that his decades-long partnership was falling apart in public. Buried inside that same interview was something sadder: rehab for alcohol, 65 pounds lost, and a battle with Crohn's disease that had been grinding him down for years. The following summer, in the second half of 2022, Frank suffered a massive stroke. He was found unconscious and rushed to the hospital, and the damage was severe enough that a court eventually appointed a guardian to manage his life and his money. His picking days, the thing that had defined his entire adult life, were over. Away from the tabloids, his old partner reportedly returned to his side, and the two men began repairing 40 years of friendship in private. Frank Fritz died on September 30th, 2024, at 60 years old. His death certificate listed a stroke brought on by cerebrovascular disease with aortic stenosis and COPD as contributing factors. The old partner he'd once gone years without speaking to was the one standing by his side at the very end, closing out 4 decades of friendship in a way none of the cameras ever caught. Frank's decline played out slowly, and in public for years. The one loss on this list nobody could honestly say caught them off guard. It's also the only one of the 10 the internet got right from the start. Frank Fritz spent his final years battling serious health issues, while Bob Peterson never got the chance to see what his future could have become. Which loss hit the hardest, and why? Which of the fake death rumors have you been believing before now? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.